All right, let's talk about something we use every single day, something we think we understand, money. But what if I told you that the very foundation of your wealth, your savings, your whole idea of security, what if it's all just an illusion? That's what we're going to dig into.
So let's kick things off with a pretty shocking prediction. The claim is that millions of people who think they're financially secure right now, could see all of that wealth just disappear in the next few years. That's a huge statement, right? So let's see where it comes from. Now, you might think that's just a wild claim, but it didn't come out of thin air. It's actually the result of a 6-month-long deep investigation that completely flipped a lifetime of financial beliefs on their head. And that whole journey started with one really basic question. To really get to the bottom of this warning, we have to rewind and ask a question that sounds simple but is actually incredibly profound. What even is money? The answer, as you're about to see, is buried deep in our own history. So first up, we're going to take a look at money's forgotten history, because, to really understand where we're going, we've got to know where we've been. So think about it. Our whole idea of paying for things has changed so much. We started out just trading stuff for other stuff, the barter system. Then, for thousands of years, we figured out that gold and silver worked really well. But then, things started to get tricky. Rulers began secretly mixing cheaper metals into their coins. Governments started issuing paper IOUs for gold. And eventually, that led us right to where we are today, a system with currency that isn't backed by anything at all. This progression is absolutely key to understanding everything else. And that brings us to maybe one of the most important ideas in all of this. There's a huge difference between money and currency. Real money, like gold, has its own value. It's a way to store your wealth over time. But currency, like the paper notes in your wallet, is really just a tool for exchange. It works as long as we all believe it does. And history has a lot to say about what happens when that belief starts to crumble.
You know what's crazy? This isn't a new story. It's a cycle that's happened over and over again throughout history. It goes like this. A powerful empire starts with good, honest money, let's say pure silver coins. But then it needs to pay for a war or something, so it starts cheating, secretly mixing in cheap copper. Eventually, people catch on. They lose faith and they start hoarding the real stuff, the pure silver. And before you know it, the cheap, debased currency becomes worthless and the whole system falls apart. This isn't just a theory, it's a historical pattern.
All right, so that historical pattern led to a single moment in modern times that changed everything. Let's talk about the end of real money.
You really need to remember this date, 1971. That's the year U.S. President Nixon went on TV and made an announcement that basically cut the world's last tie to real money. Before that day, you could technically exchange your U.S. dollars for gold. After that day, you couldn't.
And that, my friends, is what pushed us into the world we live in now, the world of fiat currency. The word fiat actually comes from Latin, and it means by decree or let it be done. It's money just because the government says it's money. Its value isn't based on a lump of gold in a vault, it's based entirely on our collective trust in the government that issues it. So once the dollar was disconnected from gold, what was stopping governments and central banks from just creating more of it? The answer is nothing. Absolutely nothing. They can now, quite literally, create new currency out of thin air with no real limits. And that has some pretty massive consequences for all of us. Okay, so this is where it all comes home to roost. This brings us to today and to how this whole system creates a hidden tax that's quietly eating away at your savings, whether you realize it or not. We all hear the word inflation, right? And we automatically think, oh, that just means my groceries are getting more expensive. But that's not the real definition. True inflation is simply an increase in the supply of currency. Those rising prices you see everywhere, that's not the problem itself. It's just the symptom. The real issue is that the currency in your pocket is slowly but surely becoming worth less and less.
And that's exactly why it's so powerful to think of it as a hidden tax. Every new dollar or pound or rupee that gets printed makes all the ones you've worked so hard for just a little bit weaker. It's a tax on your wealth that never gets voted on. It just happens, silently stealing your purchasing power year after year.
So what are we supposed to do? Well, the conventional advice is always the same. Put your money in so-called safe havens, like the stock market, mutual funds, or real estate. But here's the catch. All of those assets are priced in the very same fiat currency that's being constantly devalued. They all live inside the same system.
So it forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question. What happens when the system itself is the biggest risk?
And this is where that analogy comes in that's just so perfect. Following conventional financial advice in a system like this is like trying to use an umbrella to protect yourself from a tsunami. Sure, an umbrella might feel safe and it works fine in a light drizzle, but it is completely, utterly useless against the real, massive threat heading your way.
So if the usual advice might be flawed, let's look at what the insiders are doing. While we, the public, are told to put our faith in paper assets, what are central banks around the world doing? Well, they're buying physical gold at a pace we haven't seen in modern history. It really makes you wonder, what do they know that maybe we don't?
Given all of this, the most important question is the personal one. What can you, as an individual, actually do to prepare for this kind of future? Look, the core message here isn't to tell you to run out and buy one specific thing. It's something much simpler and honestly much more powerful than that. Educate yourself. The only real solution is to study the history of money, to truly understand how these fiat currencies work, and to learn for yourself why some things have held their value for thousands of years. Real security doesn't come from an investment tip. It comes from your own knowledge. You know, when you look back through all of history, one thing is crystal clear. Every single fiat currency, every currency backed by nothing but a government's promise, has eventually failed. It's not a matter of if it will happen again, it's really just a matter of when. And that leaves all of us with one final, very important question. When that day comes, will you be prepared?